The iPad crashed onto the cabin floor with a sound that cut through the steady drone of the Boeing 737's engines. "Look at this! The cleaning lady thinks she can understand my fighter jet specs." Lieutenant Brad Collins, 6 feet 3 inches of pure military arrogance wrapped in a crisp Air Force uniform, bent down to retrieve the device from near seat 23C. His broad shoulders blocked the narrow aisle as he held the iPad high, ensuring everyone in the surrounding rows could witness his moment of superiority. Maya Johnson remained perfectly still in her seat, her worn gray t-shirt hanging loose on her slight frame. At 28, with her brown hair tinged with subtle golden highlights pulled back in a messy ponytail, she looked like someone who'd grabbed the first clean clothes she could find. Her calm brown eyes tracked Brad's movements without emotion, though her fingers unconsciously traced a small scar behind her left ear. A souvenir from an ejection seat malfunction at 15,000 feet that she'd survived through pure instinct and training. "Hey, sorry, sweetheart, but this isn't Pinterest or whatever housewives look at these days. These are classified F-35 specifications." Brad's voice dripped with the kind of condescension reserved for those deemed beneath consideration. He turned to his group of 4 fellow pilots, their uniforms pristine and pressed, their bearing screaming elite status. "She probably thinks it's some kind of recipe app. You know, military-grade cookie instructions." The laughter that erupted was harsh and immediate. Madison Hayes, blonde and sharp-featured with her lieutenant's bars gleaming under the cabin lights, leaned across the aisle with predatory interest. "Oh my God, Brad, look at her clothes. Walmart clearance rack special. She probably can't even afford a car, let alone understand a multi-million-dollar aircraft." Tyler Chen pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose, his analytical gaze dissecting Maya like she was a particularly uninteresting specimen. "What's next? We let the janitors into Top Gun? I mean, there's diversity hiring, and then there's just desperation." The words hung in the recycled cabin air like a toxic cloud. Maya's breathing remained measured. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out. The same breathing pattern that had kept her conscious during 9G, turns over Syrian airspace when her oxygen system had partially failed. But to the mocking pilots, she was just another nobody in economy class, someone whose existence barely registered except as a target for their amusement. Marcus Webb, stocky with his red hair cropped military short, pulled out his phone with theatrical flair. "This is too good. Wait till the squadron sees this. Trailer trash trying to understand aerospace engineering. What's next? Homeless people designing rockets? Webb, that's enough." Captain Stevens, the senior officer among them, with 20 years etched into the lines around his eyes, spoke with the weariness of someone who'd seen too many young officers cross lines. But his intervention carried no real authority, more procedural than principled. "Though I do wonder what makes civilians think they can comprehend technology that takes years to master. Some people should stick to their appropriate stations." Maya adjusted her stained gray t-shirt, where Brad's accidental coffee spill from 10 minutes earlier had left a spreading brown mark. The fabric clung uncomfortably to her skin, still damp and smelling of overpriced airplane coffee. She pulled out a small notebook and began sketching with quick, precise movements. To the casual observer, they looked like mindless doodles. To someone who understood tactical flight patterns, she was drawing the exact approach vector for a combat landing in a crosswind. "Look at her, pretending to take notes." Madison's laugh was bright and cruel as she raised her phone. "This is perfect for my Instagram. When goodwill meets good taste, my followers are going to love this." Her manicured fingers danced across the screen, adding filters and captions to Maya's image. Brad dropped heavily into the empty seat across from Maya, his bulk making the cramped space feel even smaller. "So, honey, what makes you think you can understand any of this? Did you watch a documentary on Netflix? Maybe your boyfriend's in the military. Is that it? Trying to impress some enlisted guy?" The assumptions layered on top of each other like weights. Maya looked up, meeting his pale blue eyes with her steady brown ones. For a fleeting moment, something passed across her face, not hurt or anger, but something deeper. A memory of another time, another place, where underestimation had nearly cost lives. But she simply closed her notebook and slipped it into the seat pocket. Tyler leaned forward with mock concern. "Let me help you understand. That display shows the thrust-to-weight ratio of America's most advanced fighter aircraft. It's not something you learn from YouTube tutorials or community college courses, assuming you even finished high school. The F-35 has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.07 with full fuel load, Maya said quietly, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. 1.19 with 50% fuel, varies significantly based on payload configuration and atmospheric conditions. The precision of her response created a moment of stunned silence. Tyler's smirk faltered before returning with renewed force. Google University graduate. See, this is what's wrong with the internet. People memorize a few numbers and think they're experts. Bet you couldn't tell me what those ratios mean in actual combat scenarios. If you're already feeling your blood pressure rise watching this young woman endure such blatant classism and disrespect from those who should know better, please hit that like button and subscribe to support stories that reveal how wrong our first impressions can be. And if you believe that true capability doesn't care about designer labels or social status, the thanks button below is the most powerful way to help me continue sharing these moments of ultimate vindication. Now, let's return to Maya as she faces her first real test on this flight that's about to change everything. The turbulence struck without warning. The massive aircraft dropped sharply, sending loose items tumbling through the cabin. Most passengers gasped and clutched their armrests in panic, but Maya's response was entirely different. Her body automatically shifted into a protective position. Feet braced against the floor, core engaged, hands positioned to protect vital areas. The movements were subtle, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. This wasn't the panicked flailing of a nervous flyer, but the trained response of someone who'd experienced catastrophic decompression at altitude and lived to fly again. In row 24, directly behind Maya, an elderly man in a rumpled business suit took notice. His weathered hands bore the telltale scars of someone who'd spent decades around aircraft, burn marks from hot metal, precise cuts from safety wire. Something about the way Maya moved, the automatic precision of her response to the turbulence, made him lean forward with sudden interest. "Holy cow, look at that!" Marcus pointed at Maya, his laughter harsh and mocking. She went into full panic mode, probably never been on a plane before. Hey, should we tell her that turbulence won't make the wings fall off? But First Officer Maria Rodriguez, making her routine check through the cabin, had also noticed Maya's response. The way the young woman had positioned herself wasn't panic. It was trained muscle memory. Maria paused in the aisle, studying Maya with the professional assessment that came from 15 years of commercial aviation. Their eyes met briefly, and Maria saw something there that didn't match the shabby clothes and humble demeanor. "You all right, miss?" Maria asked, her voice carefully neutral despite her curiosity. "Fine, thank you," Maya replied, steady and calm despite the coffee stain spreading across her shirt and the continuing mockery from Brad's group. As Maria moved on, Maya noticed how the first officer's eyes lingered on her hands, specifically on the way her thumb maintained constant pressure against her index finger, a technique pilots use to stay centered during high-stress situations. Brad wasn't finished with his performance. The turbulence had given him fresh ammunition. See, this is exactly why civilians shouldn't try to understand military aviation. You can memorize all the Wikipedia facts you want, sweetheart. But when things get real, you show what you're really made of. We're trained for this. People like you, well, you just panic. People like you. The phrase hung between them, heavy with implications. Madison giggled, adding to her Instagram story. "Brad's dropping truth bombs today. Dreams you sorry, not sorry, just know your place." The elderly man in row 24, Mr. Peterson according to his boarding pass, carefully folded his newspaper. He'd seen this dynamic before, different faces, but the same ugly script. Yet something about this young woman's composure reminded him of someone from long ago, someone who'd proved that appearances meant nothing when lives were on the line. Maya pulled out her phone to check for messages. The screen showed 5 missed calls from Georgetown University Hospital, her mother's oncologist. She knew what they wanted, discussing payment plans for the $250,000 experimental surgery scheduled for next week. The treatment insurance wouldn't cover. The reason she'd walked away from everything. A flash of memory invaded her thoughts. Standing before an F-35 Lightning II for the first time at 25, the youngest pilot in her training class. The crew chief, a grizzled veteran named Martinez, had looked at her skeptically. "You sure you can handle her, little girl?" She'd answered him that day not with words, but with a vertical climb that pulled 9 Gs, leaving even seasoned pilots speechless. But that was before Syria, before the mission that changed everything, before choosing between career glory and family loyalty. "Earth to trailer park!" Marcus's voice shattered her reverie. "You checking if your welfare check cleared? Don't worry, our tax dollars have you covered." The casual cruelty of his words made even some nearby passengers shift uncomfortably. A mother traveling with 2 young children pulled them closer, whispering for them not to stare. The poison was spreading through the cabin like spilled wine, staining everything it touched. Tyler pulled up something on his tablet, his expression smugly superior. "Since you're so interested in military aviation, let me test your Google skills. What's the maximum angle of attack for an F-16 in a combat turn? And don't bother looking it up. I'll know." Maya's fingers stilled on her phone. She could recite not just the angle, but the exact conditions under which it changed. She could describe the sensation of blood draining from your brain as you pushed the aircraft beyond its limits, the way vision tunneled and grayed at the edges, the precise moment when you had to ease off or risk G-induced loss of consciousness. She could tell them about the time she'd exceeded that angle by 3 degrees to evade a surface-to-air missile, how the aircraft had protested but held together because she'd known exactly how far she could push. Instead, she remained silent. "That's what I thought," Tyler said triumphantly. "See, real knowledge comes from experience, not internet searches. You can't fake your way into understanding what we do." Madison had moved closer, her phone still recording. "Wait, I want to get a better shot. The contrast is perfect, her in that pathetic stained shirt next to Brad in his uniform. It's like Beauty and the Beast, except Beauty is the uniform and she's, well, you know." The flight attendant, Jenny, approached with a handful of napkins. In her mid-40s with kind eyes that had seen too much, she offered them quietly to Maya. "Here, hun, for the coffee stain. Can I get you some club soda? Might help get it out." "Thank you," Maya said, accepting the napkins with quiet dignity that made Jenny pause. There was something in the young woman's bearing that seemed at odds with her appearance. "Is everything okay here?" Jenny asked, her gaze shifting meaningfully to Brad's group. "Everything's perfect," Captain Stevens interjected smoothly. "Just having a friendly discussion about aviation. Though perhaps," he looked directly at Maya, "some people should stick to subjects more suited to their capabilities." Jenny's jaw tightened, but customer service training won the internal battle. "Well, let's keep things respectful. We still have 3 hours to DC." As she moved away, Brad stage whispered loud enough for Rose to hear. 3 more hours of her pretending she belongs in the same space as us. Must be exhausting being that delusional. Maya carefully dabbed at the coffee stain, each movement precise and controlled. In her peripheral vision, she caught Mr. Peterson watching her intently. When their eyes met, he gave an almost imperceptible nod, the kind of silent acknowledgement that passed between people who recognized something others missed. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospital. "Ms. Johnson, we need to discuss your mother's preoperative preparations. The surgeon requires payment confirmation by end of business tomorrow. $250,000. Every penny of her combat pay, her bonuses, her savings, her retirement fund, everything accumulated over 7 years of perfect service. 7 years ended by one mission, one choice, one moment when she'd decided that some things mattered more than medals and career trajectories. You know what kills me?" Marcus was gesturing broadly to include his fellow pilots. "We work our asses off, train for years, put our lives on the line, and meanwhile, people like her think they can just read about it online and understand what we do. It's honestly insulting to the uniform." Maya's carefully controlled breathing hitched slightly. Insulting to the uniform. The words settled in her chest like lead. She thought of the commendation letters stored in a box in her mother's closet, the ones that used words like exceptional valor and decisive action under fire, the ones her mother had wanted to frame but Maya had asked her to put away. Too many questions, too many memories. "Hey!" Brad snapped his fingers inches from her face. "Walmart shopper, I'm talking to you. Or is basic conversation also above your pay grade?" She looked up at him, and for just a moment, Brad saw something that made him pull back instinctively. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the same calm expression. But for that split second, He'd seen eyes that had stared down death and hadn't blinked. "I'm listening," she said quietly. "Good. Then listen to this." He was cut off by another violent bout of turbulence. The plane shook hard enough to pop several overhead compartments open. Oxygen masks stayed stowed. They weren't at that altitude, but the violence of it silenced even Brad's group momentarily. Maya's hands had moved to brace position before the first shake ended, but this time, she whispered something under her breath. 15-degree correction needed, classic wind shear signature. They're flying right into it. Tyler, despite his mockery, had caught her words. "What did you just say?" She met his gaze steadily. "Nothing important." But First Officer Rodriguez, making another pass through the cabin, had heard it too. This time she stopped directly beside Maya's row. "Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but notice. You seem very familiar with aircraft behavior." Maya met her gaze evenly. "I fly a lot." "Commercial?" "Sometimes." Maria's eyes narrowed slightly. There was something in the way this young woman held herself. The economy of movement, the constant environmental awareness, the way she diagnosed the wind shear before the pilots had announced it. "If you don't mind me asking, what takes you to D.C.? "Visiting family," Maya replied. "My mother's in the hospital." "I'm sorry to hear that." Maria's tone was genuine, but her professional assessment continued. "Georgetown University?" Maya nodded, surprised by the accurate guess. "My sister works there, oncology ward. They do amazing work." Maria paused, then added quietly, "Expensive, though." "Yes," Maya agreed simply. As Maria moved away, she glanced back once more. Something wasn't adding up. The way this woman sat, moved, breathed, it all screamed military training. But the clothes, the humble demeanor, the tolerance for abuse. Maria made a mental note to mention it to Captain Mitchell when she returned to the cockpit. Maya subtly adjusted the military-grade smartwatch hidden beneath her sleeve, hoping no one would notice its sophisticated display. The device, originally developed for fighter pilots to monitor their vitals during high G maneuvers, showed her heart rate holding steady at 58 beats per minute, abnormally low for someone enduring this level of stress, but standard for those trained to maintain composure under fire. The $3,000 piece of equipment could track everything from blood oxygen to G-force tolerance, capabilities far beyond civilian fitness trackers. "Nice watch," Madison observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Knock off Apple Watch? I bet you got it from one of those mall kiosks. They make really convincing fakes these days, almost good enough to fool people who don't know better." Maya pulled her sleeve down further. "It was a gift." "From who? Your boyfriend at the trailer park?" Madison pressed, her smile showing too many teeth. "Or did you find it somewhere? Fell off a truck?" The implications hung heavy in the recycled air. Around them, other passengers were pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. A businessman across the aisle had lowered his Wall Street Journal but wasn't reading. 2 college students had paused their movie to watch the drama unfold. The cruel theater had found its eager audience. Brad leaned back in his commandeered seat, spreading out with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been asked to make himself smaller. "You know what really gets me? My tax dollars probably paid for her to be on this flight. Some kind of welfare program, right? Meanwhile, we're over here actually serving our country, earning our place." "Serving," Maya repeated softly, the single word barely audible. "Yeah, serving. Something people like you wouldn't understand. Sacrifice, duty, honor." He counted off on his fingers like he was teaching a child basic concepts. "We put our lives on the line every single day so people like you can sit here pretending you matter." In row 24, Mr. Peterson's weathered hands had clenched into fists. He'd heard this kind of speech before, seen this particular brand of arrogance wrapped in a uniform. It made something in his gut twist with familiar disgust. But the young woman's reaction, or complete lack thereof, intrigued him. She absorbed each insult like armor, absorbing bullets, taking the impact without letting it penetrate. Tyler decided to escalate his technical challenge. "Okay, since you somehow knew that thrust-to-weight ratio, let's try something actually difficult. What's the corner velocity of an F-35 in a sustained turn at 20,000 feet?" The question was highly specific, technical knowledge you'd only possess from actual flight experience or classified manuals. Maya's eyes flickered with something, amusement, recognition, before settling back to neutral. Depends on the load configuration, she said quietly. Clean aircraft, approximately 430 knots, with full external stores, closer to 380. Tyler's mouth fell open slightly. That wasn't just correct. It was precisely correct with the kind of nuance that suggested real-world experience. How did you... he stammered. The real issue is the energy bleed rate, Maya continued, her voice still soft, almost conversational. At that altitude, you're losing about 15 knots per second in a max performance turn. Most pilots can't sustain it for more than 20 seconds without risking departure from controlled flight. Now the entire group was staring at her in shock. Captain Stevens leaned forward, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Where exactly did you read that? Because that's not information you find on Wikipedia. Maya met his gaze directly. Does it matter? Yes, he said sharply, his tone shifting from condescension to concern. Because that's classified information. She shrugged, the movement minimal. Must have good sources. The atmosphere shifted palpably. It wasn't just mockery now. Suspicion was mixing with their superiority complex. Marcus lowered his phone, suddenly uncertain about recording whatever was happening. You're military, Stevens stated. It wasn't a question. No, Maya replied truthfully. She wasn't military, not anymore. The discharge papers in her apartment made that crystal clear. Honorable, full benefits intact, but discharged nonetheless. You couldn't serve when your mother needed round-the-clock care. When the choice came down to another deployment or being there for the woman who'd raised you alone, who'd worked 3 jobs to put you through ROTC, the decision had been agonizing, but clear. Then how? He was cut off by a sudden change in the engine noise. Subtle, something most passengers wouldn't notice, but every pilot in the group heard it. The steady drone faltered for just a moment, like a heart skipping a beat. Maya's head tilted slightly, listening with intense focus. Her fingers unconsciously began tapping out a pattern on her armrest, the same pattern she used to tap on her flight stick when processing multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Did you hear that? Brad asked his group, the mockery temporarily forgotten. Probably nothing, Tyler said, but uncertainty colored his voice. These commercial birds make all kinds of noises. But Maya was already pulling out her aviation weather app, her fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. The specialized interface showed real-time atmospheric data that civilian pilots paid $500 annually to access. Her version, however, displayed additional layers: military-grade satellite feeds showing electromagnetic anomalies, clear air turbulence patterns, and other hazards that commercial aviation worked hard to avoid. A massive electromagnetic storm was forming ahead, the kind that could wreak havoc on fly-by-wire systems. What you looking at? Marcus peered over, trying to see her screen. Candy Crush, checking how much longer you have to pretend you belong here? She tilted the screen away, but not before he caught a glimpse of the complex display. His forehead creased in confusion. That didn't look like any civilian app he'd ever seen. The plane shuddered again, longer this time, with a grinding quality that spoke of systems under stress. The captain's voice came over the intercom, professionally calm, but with an underlying tension that made Maya sit up straighter. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell. We're experiencing some unusual atmospheric conditions. Nothing to be concerned about at this time, but I'm going to ask the flight attendants to take their seats for a few minutes. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened. The flight attendants moved with practiced efficiency, but Maya caught the look that passed between Jenny and Maria Rodriguez. It was the look of professionals who knew when something wasn't quite right. Have you ever noticed how quickly arrogance turns to fear when reality stops playing by the rules? Drop a comment below if you've ever watched someone's superiority complex crumble when they realized they'd been mocking the very person they'd need to save them. The vindication is coming, and it's going to be spectacular. Brad's group had gone quiet, their earlier bravado dampened by the captain's announcement. But as minutes passed without catastrophe, their confidence began creeping back. See, this is the difference between us and civilians, Brad announced, loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear. We're trained to stay calm in situations like this. Notice how our friend here is white-knuckling her armrest? Probably terrified out of her mind. Maya's hands were indeed on her armrest, but she wasn't gripping them in fear. Her fingers were positioned at specific pressure points, a technique taught in advanced flight training to maintain circulation and readiness during high-stress situations. Her breathing remained steady. 4 counts in, 7 hold, 8 out. Madison had recovered enough to pull out her phone again. This is actually perfect when you're scared of flying but trying to act tough. My followers are going to eat this up. She angled for another photo, but the plane lurched sideways, sending her phone clattering to the floor. This wasn't ordinary turbulence. Maya's trained senses cataloged the differences: the lateral movement, the slight nose-down attitude, the way the engines seemed to be fighting against something they couldn't overcome. Her mind ran through possibilities: wind shear, system malfunction, hydraulic issues. None of the options were good at 35,000 feet over the Midwest. Okay, that was different, Tyler admitted, his technical knowledge overriding his need to posture. That felt like the autopilot correcting for something it shouldn't have to correct for. Maya finished quietly. Everyone stared at her in stunned silence. How could you possibly know that? Captain Stevens demanded. She met his gaze evenly. The same way you do, by paying attention. The lights flickered, just for a moment, but enough to send a ripple of concern through the cabin. In modern commercial aircraft, the electrical systems had multiple redundancies. For the lights to flicker meant something was affecting primary power. Mr. Peterson had leaned forward now, no longer pretending to read his newspaper. His weathered face showed recognition, not of Maya specifically, but of the situation developing around them. He'd been in enough aircraft to know when things were going sideways, both literally and figuratively. First Officer Rodriguez emerged from the cockpit, her face professionally calm, but moving with purpose. She went straight to the senior flight attendant, Jenny, and they conferred in low voices. Maya caught fragments. System anomalies, manual backup, precautionary. The aircraft banked sharply left, enough to send loose items sliding across the cabin. Someone's coffee cup rolled down the aisle. A child started crying. The veneer of normalcy was cracking like ice under pressure. This isn't right, Marcus said, his bravado evaporating. Commercial planes don't fly like this. No, Maya agreed. They don't. Her calm response in the face of growing chaos made them all look at her again. Where others were beginning to panic, she seemed to be settling deeper into her seat, her body relaxing in a way that seemed completely counterintuitive. You're not scared, Stevens observed, his tone accusatory, as if her composure was somehow offensive. Fear is a luxury, Maya replied. Focus is a necessity. It was the kind of thing someone said when they'd been trained to function in life-or-death situations. Stevens knew it, Brad knew it, they all knew it. But admitting it would mean admitting they'd been wrong, and pride was a powerful anchor. The captain's voice returned, less steady now. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our navigation systems. We're working on it, but I need to ask everyone to remain seated with seatbelts securely fastened. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin. Prepare the cabin was airline speak for things might get rough. Flight attendants moved through the aisles with renewed urgency, checking seatbelts, securing loose items, their professional smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Maya closed her eyes, not in fear but in concentration. She was calculating. Distance to DC, probable altitude, wind patterns she'd observed on her weather app, fuel consumption rates for a 737 under stress. The math wasn't encouraging. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the hospital. This time, a photo attachment. Her mother, smiling despite the tubes and monitors, holding a sign. Can't wait to see you, baby girl. The woman who'd worked 3 jobs to put Maya through college, who'd never missed a graduation, a promotion ceremony, a deployment send-off, who'd been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer the same week Maya had been selected for a classified mission that would have cemented her career trajectory. The choice hadn't been a choice at all. Look at her, checking her phone like nothing's happening, Madison said, but her voice lacked its earlier venom. Fear was beginning to equalize them all. Probably doesn't even understand how serious this is. If this moment of building tension has your heart racing, share this video with someone who needs to see that true strength often comes in the most unexpected packages. The revelation ahead will change everything, and you won't want to experience it alone. The plane dropped suddenly, not turbulence this time, but a controlled descent that felt anything but controlled. Oxygen masks remained stowed, but the angle was steep enough to cause ears to pop and stomachs to lurch. Someone screamed, several passengers were openly praying. Brad's group had gone completely silent, their faces pale. The reality of their situation was beginning to penetrate their bubble of superiority. They were all pilots, yes, but pilots of single-seat fighters, not commercial airliners full of civilians. The responsibility, the complexity, the sheer number of lives at stake, it was a different world entirely. "We need to do something," Tyler said, his analytical mind racing. "If the fly-by-wire system is compromised, what exactly do you suggest?" Stevens cut him off. "Walk up to the cockpit and offer to help? This isn't an F-22. This is a 737 with 180 souls on board." Souls. Military terminology for lives under your protection. Maya noticed the shift in language, the way Crisis stripped away pretense and revealed core training. The descent continued, controlled but concerning. Maya's app showed they were dropping through 28,000 feet. At this rate, they'd need to find somewhere to land within the next 20 minutes. Her mind automatically mapped possible airports. Kansas City, Des Moines, Omaha, all required functioning navigation systems. Maria Rodriguez appeared again, this time making direct eye contact with Maya. "Miss, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty." Her voice was low, meant only for Maya's ears. "Are you a pilot?" The question hung between them. Around them, Brad's group leaned in, suddenly very interested in the answer. Maya considered her options. The technical truth was no. She wasn't a pilot, not anymore. Her license had been suspended pending recertification, a formality she hadn't bothered with after leaving the service. But that wasn't what Maria was really asking. "I have some experience," she said carefully. "Military?" Maria pressed. A pause, then, "Previously." Maria's eyes widened slightly. "Fighter aircraft?" Another pause. "Among other things." The first officer straightened, decision made. "I need to speak with the captain. Don't go anywhere." As she hurried back to the cockpit, Brad found his voice. "No way! No freaking way! You're telling me." "I'm not telling you anything," Maya interrupted, her voice still calm, but carrying an edge of authority that made him stop mid-sentence. "But right now, maybe focus less on who I am, and more on the fact that we're descending through 25,000 feet with obvious system failures." "How do you know our altitude?" Marcus demanded. She gestured to the window. "Sun angle, ground visibility, and the fact that my ears have popped 3 times in the last 2 minutes. Basic observation." But it wasn't basic, and they all knew it. It was the kind of calculation done automatically by someone who'd spent thousands of hours in the air, someone for whom altitude was as fundamental as breathing. The intercom crackled, Captain Mitchell's voice no longer hiding his stress. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to be frank with you. We're experiencing multiple system failures. We're descending to a safer altitude and looking for the nearest suitable airport. I need everyone to remain calm and follow crew instructions exactly." Then, the words that changed everything. "Additionally, this is highly unusual, but I need to ask, are there any military pilots on board? Specifically, anyone with experience in fly-by-wire systems? If so, please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately." The blood drained from Brad's face, from all their faces. They were military pilots, yes, but none of them had logged significant hours in anything larger than a fighter. Commercial aviation was a completely different beast, with different systems, different procedures, different everything. Maya's hand moved to her call button, hesitating over it. 7 years of habit said to stay quiet, to remain invisible. But 180 lives said otherwise. "You're not seriously," Brad started. She pressed the button. Jenny appeared almost instantly, her professional composure cracking around the edges. "Yes?" "The captain asked for military pilots," Maya said simply. "Oh, thank God," Jenny breathed. "What's your experience?" Maya glanced at Brad's group, all staring at her with a mixture of shock and disbelief, then back to Jenny. 7 years, multi-engine qualified, fly-by-wire specialist. Aircraft type, a heartbeat of hesitation. Then, F-35 Lightning II primary, among others. The words landed like bombs in the sudden silence. Jenny's eyes widened. Behind her, Mr. Peterson slowly stood up and, in a gesture that would have seemed bizarre moments ago, straightened to attention. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Chief Master Sergeant Peterson, retired. I flew with the Ghost Riders in '91. Maya's eyes flickered with recognition. The Ghost Riders. Everyone in the aviation community knew that unit. Peterson had been there for the Highway of Death, the legendary mission that had helped end the Gulf War. "Sergeant," she acknowledged with a slight nod. Wait, Madison's voice cracked. You're saying, I'm saying, Maya said, finally meeting her tormentor's eyes, that right now, your Instagram followers are the least of your problems. The aircraft shuddered again, a grinding vibration that suggested something mechanical joining the electrical problems. Through it all, Maya remained steady, her worn gray t-shirt still stained with Brad's coffee, her calm presence suddenly the most reassuring thing in a cabin full of fear. "Please," Jenny said, urgency overriding protocol. "Come with me." As Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, her movements fluid despite the aircraft's instability, Tyler blurted out, "But you're so young, and you look like..." "Like what?" Maya asked, pausing. He couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the prejudices that had seemed so reasonable minutes ago. Couldn't reconcile the person they'd been mocking with the professional standing before them. "Like someone you underestimated," she finished for him. "Yes, I get that a lot." She moved past Brad, who shrank back in his seat as if her competence was contagious. Past Madison, whose phone lay forgotten in her lap. Past Marcus, who couldn't meet her eyes. Past Captain Stevens, whose lifetime of assumptions were crumbling in real time. As she reached the cockpit door, the plane lurched violently to the right. Several overhead bins popped open, spilling luggage into the aisles. Someone's military duffel bag fell at Brad's feet, challenge coins and unit patches scattering across the floor. One coin rolled to a stop against Maya's foot. A black coin with a golden eagle and the words, "Aim high." She picked it up, glanced at it, and handed it back to Brad. "Hold on to that," she said quietly. "You might need the reminder." Then First Officer Rodriguez opened the cockpit door, and Maya Johnson, 28 years old, wearing a coffee-stained gray t-shirt, the woman they'd all dismissed as trailer trash, stepped through to try and save all their lives. The cockpit door sealed behind Maya with a soft pneumatic hiss, instantly muting the chaos of the main cabin. What greeted her was organized panic. Warning lights painting the cramped space in angry reds and ambers, alarms chiming in overlapping sequences that would have been overwhelming to anyone not trained to process multiple crisis inputs simultaneously. Captain Thomas Mitchell, 20,000 hours of experience etched into the lines of his face, looked up from his battle with unresponsive controls. His professional calm was cracking around the edges, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool cockpit air. "You're the military pilot?" "Captain Maya Johnson, formerly 398th Fighter Squadron," she confirmed, already scanning the instrument panels with the rapid assessment of someone who'd made split-second decisions at Mach 1.6. "F-35 primary, but I've logged time on multiple fly-by-wire platforms." "Thank God." The relief in Mitchell's voice was palpable. "We've got cascading failures across multiple systems. Started with the flight management computer 20 minutes ago. But now we're losing hydraulics, and the fly-by-wire system is giving us contradictory inputs. It's like trying to fly 3 different aircraft simultaneously." Maya slipped into the jump seat, her mind already cataloging the failures in order of criticality. The primary flight display showed impossible readings. Altitude indicators disagreeing by thousands of feet. Airspeed readings that couldn't all be accurate. An artificial horizon that insisted they were in a 30-degree bank when the physical sensation suggested level flight. "Electromagnetic interference?" she asked, recognizing the pattern from combat scenarios. "That's our working theory," First Officer Rodriguez confirmed, her hands steady on controls that weren't responding properly. "We flew through some kind of atmospheric anomaly about 20 minutes ago. Everything went sideways after that." Maya's mind shifted into the analytical mode that had saved her life over Syria. "Show me your backup system status." Captain Mitchell pulled up the display with shaking fingers. Half the redundancies were offline or showing errors. The 737, one of the most reliable aircraft ever built, was being reduced to basic stick and rudder flying, except the stick and rudder were filtered through dying computers. "Can you help?" Mitchell asked directly, no ego in his voice, just a professional recognizing when he was out of his depth. "Maybe. The F-35 has similar architecture, but different implementation. If we can isolate the good channels from the bad..." She was already thinking 3 steps ahead, her mind running through procedures most pilots never had to use. "I need to see your circuit breaker panels, and someone needs to prepare the cabin for manual flight mode. It's going to get rough." Back in the cabin, the announcement came through Jenny's professional but strained voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to experience some irregular flight patterns as we work through our technical issues. Please ensure your seatbelts are tightly fastened and follow all crew instructions immediately." Brad Collins sat frozen in his seat, his worldview shattering like safety glass. The woman he'd mocked, humiliated, whose very presence he'd questioned. She was now their only hope. The irony tasted like ashes in his mouth. "She can't be," Madison whispered, her phone recording nothing but her own shock. "She's our age. She looks like she shops at thrift stores. How can she be qualified to—" "Because she's better than us," Tyler interrupted, his analytical mind finally processing what they'd missed. The way she quoted those specs wasn't from Google, the way she moved during turbulence, even the way she breathes. We were so busy looking at her clothes and making assumptions that we missed everything that actually mattered. Mr. Peterson had moved closer to their group, his weathered face stern with the authority of someone who'd seen real combat. "You want to know who she is? I'll tell you who she is. 3 years ago, there was a classified incident over the Mediterranean. 4 F-35s went up against 12 hostile aircraft. Only 1 pilot came back. Shot down 3 MiGs, shepherded a damaged wingman to friendly airspace, then flew her own bird back with half the control surfaces gone. They called her the ghost of the Med." "That's impossible," Marcus protested weakly. "That would make her 25 at the time," Peterson confirmed. "Youngest ace in modern Air Force history, and you mocked her for looking at an iPad." In the cockpit, Maya had pulled up system schematics on the backup display, her fingers flying across the interface with the same precision she'd once used to program weapons systems. "Okay, I see the problem. Your fly-by-wire system is trying to compensate for false inputs. It thinks you're in an uncommanded role because the sensors are feeding it corrupted data. So we shut down the bad sensors?" Rodriguez asked, hopefully. "Not that simple. Shut down the wrong ones and we lose all control. We need to isolate the good channels, reroute through backup, and essentially rebuild the control logic in real time." Maya paused, calculating risks. "In the F-35, we called it combat rewiring. You lose primary systems, you make new ones on the fly." "Can you do it?" Mitchell asked. "Done it before," she said simply. "Different aircraft, same principles. But I'll need both of you following my lead exactly. No hesitation, no second guessing. Can you do that?" Both pilots nodded. Here in the cockpit, there was no room for the prejudices that had poisoned the cabin. There was only competence and trust. "First, we need to disable autothrottle completely. It's fighting your manual inputs." Maya reached for the overhead panel, her movements confident despite the unfamiliar layout. Muscle memory from thousands of hours translated across platforms. "Captain, when I say mark, I need you to pull circuit breakers 7 through 12 on panel 2. Rodriguez, you'll need to manually balance thrust on my call. We're going to fly this bird like it's 1958 all over again." The aircraft shuddered, dropping another 500 feet in seconds. In the cabin, prayers were audible over the sound of straining engines. Brad's group sat silent, each lost in their own reckonings. "Mark," Maya called. The lights flickered as systems reset. For a moment, the aircraft flew straight and level, responding to manual inputs like an old friend remembering how to dance. Then, another alarm sounded. Hydraulic pressure dropping in System 2. "We're losing fluid," Mitchell reported. "Must have damaged a line in that last maneuver." Maya's mind raced through options. Partial hydraulic failure meant limited control surface authority. They'd need to use differential thrust for directional control, lower flaps early to maintain lift at reduced speeds, and find a runway long enough to accommodate a potentially hot landing. "Nearest suitable airport?" she asked. "Kansas City International, bearing 270, 85 miles, Rodriguez read off. "But without nav systems?" "I can get us there," Maya interrupted. "Used to fly this corridor during continental defense exercises. There's a VOR station at Topeka we can use as a reference point. From there, I can dead reckon us to the approach." She pulled out her phone, opening the military-grade aviation app. The sophisticated interface showed detailed terrain, weather, and the electromagnetic anomaly they had flown through, a massive disturbance that would have wreaked havoc on any unshielded electronics. "How do you have access to that?" Mitchell asked, recognizing classified data streams. "Still technically on reserve status," Maya explained, working calculations in her head. "Never bothered to formally separate the clearances. We need heading 265 for 40 miles, then 285 to intercept the approach. Have them foam the runway. We're going to need all the help we can get." In the cabin, Jenny was moving through the rows with practiced efficiency, preparing passengers for an emergency landing. When she reached Brad's group, she paused. "The captain wanted me to tell you she's attempting something called manual reversion. Said you'd understand what that means." Tyler's face went white as fresh paper. "Manual reversion on a 737? That's like trying to perform surgery with oven mitts in an earthquake." "Is she qualified for that?" Madison asked, forgetting that minutes ago she'd questioned if Maya could read. "Nobody's qualified for that," Stevens said quietly. "It's not something you train for. It's something you survive." The aircraft banked left, the turn uncoordinated and sluggish. In the cockpit, Maya was orchestrating a complex ballet between the two pilots. Think of it like formation flying, except you're both controlling different parts of the same aircraft. "Mitchell, you've got pitch authority. Rodriguez, you're my differential thrust. I'll call the corrections." Her voice remained hypnotically calm. It was the same voice that had talked her wingman through catastrophic damage over Syria, the same voice that had guided terrified young pilots through their first combat missions, the voice that had earned her call sign, Phantom, calm as death, inevitable as gravity. "Descending through 15,000, Rodriguez reported, hydraulic pressure still dropping. "Expected," Maya confirmed. "We'll have one shot at this. Gear extension will use most of our remaining pressure. After that, we're committed. No go-arounds, no second chances." She thought of her mother, waiting in that hospital bed, the surgery scheduled for next week, the experimental treatment that represented her only chance. $250,000. Everything Maya had saved, invested, earned through blood and sacrifice. All for the possibility of hearing her mother's voice for another year, another month, another day. The radio crackled to life. Aircraft descending through 15,000, heading 265, Kansas City approach. State your intentions. Mitchell keyed the mic. "Kansas City, this is United 873 declaring emergency. Multiple system failures, partial hydraulics, requesting extended straight-in runway 19er, emergency vehicles standing by. United 873, cleared direct runway 19er, winds 230 at 15 gusting 25. Emergency vehicles notified. Say souls on board?" Mitchell glanced at Maya. She held up fingers. 183 souls on board, 5 hours fuel remaining. Be advised, we have limited control authority and will require the full runway length. Roger, 873, we're clearing all traffic. The runway is yours. In the cabin, the flight attendants were running through emergency procedures. "Heads down, stay down, brace, brace, brace." The rhythmic chant that no passenger ever wanted to hear in real life. Brad found himself thinking of all the times he'd landed his F-22, the smooth touchdown of a single-seat fighter that he'd taken for granted. That aircraft had an ejection seat. This woman he'd called trailer trash, was bringing home a crippled airliner with nearly 200 souls depending on her skill. "I've been such a fool," he said to no one in particular. "We all have," Stevens agreed, his command presence finally used for truth instead of intimidation. "Every single one of us." The airport appeared through the forward windows, a concrete ribbon promising safety if they could reach it. Maya had guided them using nothing but mental calculations and remembered landmarks, threading between storm cells and traffic patterns with surgical precision. 10 miles out, she announced. "Time to configure. Gear down on my mark. Once it's down, we're landing no matter what happens. No go-arounds with hydraulic failure." The pilots exchanged glances. This was it. Trust the woman they couldn't see, whose credentials came from combat rather than commercial aviation, whose appearance had made her invisible until crisis stripped away everything but ability. "Ready," Mitchell said. Mark. The gear extension was painful to hear, grinding, slow, asymmetric. The left main gear locked first, throwing the aircraft into an unexpected yaw that required immediate correction. Maya's voice cut through. Right throttle up 2%, left throttle back 1. Mitchell, 2 degrees right stick. Hold it, hold it. 3 green lights, gear down and locked. But the hydraulic quantity gauge read 0. Whatever control they had now was all they'd have for landing. 5 miles, beginning descent. Maya's hands flew over her phone, calculating approach angles based on their degraded performance. We'll be 15 knots fast over the threshold, planted in the first 1,000 feet and maximum braking. The overrun area is our friend today. In the cabin, Mr. Peterson had moved to an empty seat where he could see out the window. He watched the ground rising to meet them, remembering his own emergency landings, his own moments when skill and luck danced together on a razor's edge. But he'd never seen anything quite like this. A fighter pilot translating combat instincts to commercial aviation in real time, building new procedures as she went. You know what kills me most? Marcus said suddenly. We had a genuine hero sitting right there, and we treated her like garbage. What kind of officers are we? The kind who are about to learn a lesson we'll never forget, Tyler replied, if she gets us down alive. 3 miles, 2. The runway grew larger, but their approach was unstable. Without proper hydraulics, every control input was magnified or dampened unpredictably. Maya had stopped calling individual corrections and was simply flowing with the aircraft, feeling its rhythms, anticipating its needs. 1 mile, Rodriguez called. Speed 160, sinking 800 feet per minute. Too fast, too steep. But Maya had accounted for it. Mitchell, at 50 feet, idle thrust and pull back smoothly. Don't fight the sink, embrace it. Rodriguez, the instant the mains touch, full reverse thrust. Don't wait for the nose wheel. The ground rushed up. In the cabin, 180 souls held their breath. Brad's group had instinctively joined hands, their earlier divisions meaningless in the face of shared mortality. 100 feet, 50, 40, Maya's voice cut through. Now! The impact was hard, harder than any normal landing should be. The right main gear touched first, sending a shudder through the entire airframe. Then the left, then a bounce that lifted them 5 feet before gravity reclaimed its due. The nose slammed down with a crash that popped overhead bins throughout the aircraft. Reverse thrust, maximum braking, Maya commanded. The engine screamed in protest, thrust reversers deploying asymmetrically. The aircraft pulled left, then right, requiring constant corrections as they hurtled down the runway at over 100 miles per hour. Fire trucks raced alongside, ready for the worst. 3,000 feet of runway consumed, 4,000, 5,000. The end approaching fast, overrun area visible. But the speed was bleeding off, 90 miles per hour, 70, 50. They stopped with 1,500 feet to spare. For a moment, perfect silence. Then the cabin erupted. Cheers, tears, prayers of thanksgiving in a dozen languages. They were alive. They were on the ground. They were safe. In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell slumped in his seat, hands shaking with released adrenaline. 20,000 hours of flying, and I couldn't have done that. How did you? Maya smiled for the first time since entering the cockpit. You fly enough combat missions, you learn that sometimes the only way through is through. No overthinking, no second guessing, just trust your training and commit. Will you stay while we shut down? Rodriguez asked. I'd like to learn from this. Hell, I'd like to learn from you. Of course, Maya agreed, then softer. But first, someone should tell the cabin they're safe. They've been through enough. Mitchell keyed the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are safely on the ground at Kansas City International. On behalf of the entire crew, I want to thank you for your patience and cooperation. And I especially want to acknowledge that we owe our lives to a passenger who stepped up when we needed her most. Captain Maya Johnson, United States Air Force. You have our eternal gratitude. The applause was deafening, but Maya was already thinking ahead. Ground transportation to D.C., her mother's surgery, the life that waited beyond this moment of clarity. As the aircraft was towed to the gate, surrounded by emergency vehicles like an honor guard, Brad's group sat in stunned silence. The woman they'd mocked had saved them. The person they deemed worthless had proven herself beyond any measure they possessed. Jenny appeared at their row. "Captain Johnson wanted me to give you this." She handed Brad a napkin with writing on it. In precise script, it read, "True strength doesn't announce itself. It simply acts when needed. Remember that." "Is she coming back?" Madison asked, her voice small and broken. "She's helping with the shutdown procedures," Jenny replied. "But she asked me to tell you something specific." She looked at each of them in turn. She said, "Tell them I forgive them, but more importantly, tell them to forgive themselves and become better. The Air Force needs officers who see people, not appearances." As passengers began deplaning via mobile stairs, Brad's group remained seated, each lost in their own thoughts. They'd faced death and been found wanting. They'd met excellence and failed to recognize it. The lessons cut deep. 20 minutes later, Maya emerged from the cockpit, her gray t-shirt still coffee-stained, her calm demeanor unchanged despite having just performed what many would call a miracle. She moved through the cabin, accepting quiet thanks from passengers, checking on elderly travelers, ensuring everyone was okay. When she reached their row, she paused. 5 military officers, humbled and seeking something they couldn't name. Absolution? Understanding? A second chance they didn't deserve? "Ma'am," Brad stood, coming to attention despite his shame. "Captain Brad Collins, 494th Fighter Squadron. There aren't words for how wrong we were." Maya studied him, then the others. Each met her eyes with difficulty but determination. "Words don't matter, Captain. Actions do. You want to honor what happened here? Be better officers. Lead better. See people for who they are, not what you assume them to be." "How?" Tyler asked genuinely. "How do we not make these mistakes again?" "By remembering this feeling," Maya replied. "The humility, the recognition of your own limitations, the understanding that excellence comes in all forms. Hold on to it. Let it change you." She moved past them toward the exit, but Stevens called out, "Captain Johnson, are you still active duty? We'd like to, that is, our squadron would be honored to learn from you." Maya turned back, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I'm not active duty anymore, Captain Stevens. I left 6 months ago. Family obligations." Her phone buzzed, another message from the hospital. "Speaking of which, I need to be somewhere." "You left?" Marcus couldn't hide his shock. "But with your record, your skills, sometimes the greatest service isn't to your country," Maya said quietly. "Sometimes it's to the person who gave everything so you could serve in the first place. My mother needs me more than the Air Force does. That's my mission now." She walked away, leaving them with one final thought. "Oh, and that Instagram post, Lieutenant Hayes, the one mocking the trailer trash, my call sign was Phantom, as in the pilot who trained your squadron's current weapons instructor. Captain Sarah Chen, she was my wingman. Small world, isn't it?" Madison's face drained of all color. She fumbled for her phone, deleting posts with shaking fingers. But the internet had already preserved her shame. Comments flooding in from military members who recognized the significance of what she'd done. At the gate, Maya was met by airline officials, Kansas City police wanting statements, and a small crowd of passengers wanting to thank their savior. She handled it all with the same quiet grace, deflecting praise, focusing on ensuring everyone was okay. Mr. Peterson approached as the crowd thinned. "Captain Johnson, I wanted to say, I've flown with some of the best. What you did today ranks with anything I've ever seen in 40 years of aviation." "Just doing what needed to be done, Sergeant," Maya replied. "No," he disagreed firmly. "You did it while carrying the weight of their ignorance and cruelty. That takes a different kind of strength." He handed her a business card. "I run a veterans organization now. If you ever need anything, job opportunities, support, someone to talk to about the old days, you call me." As Maya finally made it to the terminal, her phone rang. The hospital, her heart rate, steady through the entire emergency, spiked. "Miss Johnson, this is Dr. Williams. Your mother's condition has stabilized, but we really need to discuss payment arrangements for the surgery. The window for the experimental treatment is closing." "I'll be there tomorrow," Maya promised. "The money will be available." She ended the call and caught her reflection in a terminal window. Coffee-stained shirt, tired eyes, but steady hands. The same hands that had just saved 180 lives. The same hands that would sign away her entire future to maybe, possibly save one more. Behind her, Brad's group emerged from the jetway. They had been detained for additional statements, their military status requiring extra documentation. She watched their reflection. 5 officers forever changed by one flight, one crisis, one revelation of their own blindness. Her phone buzzed again. An unknown number with a DC area code. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Captain Johnson?" The voice was crisp, military, female. "This is General Patricia Morrison, Air Force Chief of Staff. I just received a rather interesting report from Kansas City ATC. We need to talk about your future." "With respect, General, my future is caring for my mother." "I understand that, Captain, which is why I'm calling. We have programs now, support systems for exceptional officers with family obligations. What you did today, we can't afford to lose talent like yours permanently." Maya listened as the General outlined possibilities, consulting positions, training roles, flexible arrangements that hadn't existed when she'd made her impossible choice. "I'll think about it," Maya said finally. "But right now, I have a connection to catch, a real one this time, with hopefully functioning systems." "Of course. But Captain, the offer stands. Sometimes serving your country and serving your family don't have to be mutually exclusive. We're finally learning that lesson." As Maya headed for her connecting gate, she passed a news crew setting up for interviews. Already, the story was spreading. "Mysterious passenger saves plane." Former fighter pilot emerges from anonymity. Hero in a coffee-stained shirt. She avoided them all, focused on what mattered. But the universe had one more test. At her gate, a young girl, maybe 12, was watching news coverage on her tablet. Her eyes went wide as she recognized Maya from the shaky cell phone footage already circulating. "That's you!" the girl exclaimed. "You're the pilot who saved everyone." Maya knelt to the girl's level. "I helped. The whole crew saved everyone. But you're just normal looking, not like the pilots on TV." Maya smiled, remembering herself at that age, dreaming of flight despite everyone who said she didn't look the part. That's the secret. Heroes look like everyone. They look like you. As Maya boarded her connection to DC, she thought about ripples. How one moment of prejudice had led to revelation. How 5 officers would return to their squadrons changed. How a young girl now knew that heroes didn't need to look like Hollywood. The second flight to Washington was mercifully uneventful. Maya dozed fitfully, dreaming of her mother's smile, of surgical successes, of futures where capability was recognized regardless of its packaging. But as they descended into Reagan National, her phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. The unknown number again, but this time with an attachment, a photograph. The image showed a hangar at night, an F-35 in the background, but in the foreground was a figure in flight gear, face obscured by shadow. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The location tag, classified. The message read, "We know about the Mediterranean. We know what really happened to Eagle Flight. Some secrets don't stay buried. Contact this number, or the truth goes public in 48 hours. Maya stared at the message, her mind racing. The Mediterranean. The mission that had made her a legend to some, a problem to others. The incident that had really prompted her voluntary separation when her mother got sick. The secret that could destroy not just her reputation, but national security itself. She deleted the message, knowing it wouldn't matter. Ghosts had a way of returning, especially in the intelligence world. She'd saved 180 lives today, but the lives she'd taken 3 years ago, justified though they were, might now cost her everything. As the plane touched down smoothly at Reagan National, Maya gathered her things and prepared for whatever came next. Her mother needed her. That hadn't changed, but now, it seemed, someone else needed something from her, too. In the terminal, she noticed a familiar face by baggage claim. Colonel Patricia Hayes, dressed in civilian clothes but unmistakably military in bearing. Not from the flight, from before, from the debrief after the Mediterranean. "Maya," Hayes said quietly, "we need to talk. My mother is stable. I checked. You have time for coffee. You're going to want to hear what I have to say." They found a quiet corner in an airport restaurant. Hayes ordered coffee for both of them, then pulled out a tablet, angling it so only Maya could see. "Someone's trying to expose Operation Nightfall," Hayes said without preamble. "The Mediterranean incident. They've been reaching out to journalists, to the families of the pilots who didn't come back. Maya's hands remained steady on her coffee cup. And you want me to what? Lie again? I want you to consider what's at stake. If this goes public, it's not just your career. It's international relations, the peace we've maintained, the deal that kept it from escalating. Peace built on covering up the truth. Peace built on classified operations staying classified, Hayes corrected. You did what you had to do. The fact that those weren't really insurgent aircraft, that they were... I know what they were, Maya cut her off. I know who was flying them. I live with it every day. Someone's using that knowledge as leverage. We need you back, Maya, temporarily. Help us manage this before it spirals out of control. I can't. My mother will receive the best care money can buy. We'll cover the surgery, all of it, and set up a care fund. Consider it what we should have done from the beginning. $250,000, freedom from the crushing weight of debt, all for returning to a world she'd tried to leave behind. I saved lives today, Maya said quietly. It felt clean, simple. This is why I left. This is why we need you back, because you understand the complexity, because you can navigate the gray areas while keeping your moral center. Hayes paused. Because you're the only one from Eagle Flight who survived, and if this goes public, your testimony might be all that stands between peace and war. Maya's phone buzzed. The unknown number again. 47 hours, 58 minutes. Major Khalid's family deserves to know how their son died. Khalid. They knew his name. Whoever was behind this had access to information that should have been buried in black sites. She stood, gathering her things. I'll think about it. Think fast, Hayes warned. Whoever's behind this isn't playing games. And Maya, that thing today on the plane, word's already spreading through channels. You've got admirers in high places again. Also enemies. Visible excellences like that. As Maya left the restaurant, she found herself at a crossroads she'd thought she'd left behind. Her mother was waiting, that was certain, but somewhere in the shadows, someone was counting down to a revelation that could shatter more than just her life. She stepped out into the DC evening, the humid air a sharp contrast to the recycled atmosphere of airports and aircraft. A taxi waited at the curb. Georgetown University Hospital, she told the driver, settling into the worn seat. As the city lights blurred past, Maya thought about choices. About the moment over the Mediterranean when she'd had to decide between her flight and an international incident. About the moment 6 months ago when she'd had to choose between her career and her mother. About the moment on the plane when she'd had to choose between staying hidden and saving lives. Some choices, she reflected, you never stopped making. They just kept presenting themselves in new forms, demanding new sacrifices. Her phone showed 47 hours, 42 minutes. But first, her mother. Everything else, the secrets, the threats, the promises of redemption, would have to wait. The taxi pulled up to the hospital entrance. Maya paid the driver and stood for a moment, looking up at the building that held what remained of her family. Somewhere behind one of those windows, her mother waited. Sometimes, she whispered to the night air, the hardest battles are the ones nobody sees. She walked through the automatic doors, leaving behind the world of classifications and conspiracies for a few precious hours. But Maya Johnson knew, with the certainty of someone who'd flown too close to too many suns, that some orbits you could never really escape. You could only choose which ones were worth the burn.